Okay, Bubba. Here is the stack that Jerry was talking about.
Hey guys, I'd like to say hi to everybody. Bubba, this is the killer sound you will be hearing soon.
My name's Jerry, and I'm the guitar player for Otto's Revenge. So many guys that I kind of knew were like, you got to know covers, and I was never a cover guitar player. I could play cover tunes, but I was always looking for something else. And then I met a bunch of guys in college that were like, why don't you do original? And I go, I never thought of that. So they said, write your own stuff. So I started writing my own material, and luckily I met a drummer, a bass player, and two singers actually. And we started playing and writing our own music in college, and we were called Suburban Scream. At the end of college, I was down to me and the drummer, Dean Russell. We were like the last two members left of Subscream, and we put flyers up. We were looking for a new singer. And then one day I was at home, and Kurt called me, and it was awesome because he was a real soft-spoken. He's like, yeah, my name's Kurt, and he goes, I can write lyrics really well, but I've never sang before, but I'd be willing to try. And I thought, wow, this guy sounds pretty cool, so I think we met up about a week later. This was like 1989, and I met at his dad's house, and we started writing material like almost immediately in his dad's basement. And one of the first songs we wrote together was TV Nation, which is really a song that we still do. That we do well with. So yeah, it was just, we clicked right away. So I knew he was the one.
TV Nation going insane. TV Nation going insane. Class A's his favorite game show. That's brother, he don't care. Who's waste from the
Well, I didn't start singing until I met Jerry. It was something I'd been interested in since I was a little kid, but I was always interested in being in a band. I never really learned any instruments or did anything musically until I met Jerry.
This is Kurt, man. He's writing some killer lyrics, so we're going to focus in on that bad boy. There's Otto. This is the nerve center. This is where it all happens, in the basement, right?
Yeah, the noise center.
I got into writing poetry a few years before that and was really into that, and I found a lot of my poetry was structured like songs, so I decided I'm just gonna go for it and try this out. And I saw a flyer and met him, and that's when I started singing.
No, when we were tracking, all those drums and basses and stuff that were set up, no, not good enough. And the guitar player is the most important person in the band, I understand.
I'm gonna say it was probably in '91. I responded to an ad in the University District in St. Louis, and it was for a guitar player and a singer looking for a bass player and a drummer, and I responded to the bass player wanted, and went to meet those guys and talk to them, and they just seemed really cool, and we were all on the same page, and we liked all the same kind of music, and it just kind of flowed from there.
Too much, man. Dude, what do you want me to do? Suck your dick? No, I want you to sit there and be like,
Dude, I've seen Metallica, man. I've seen Metallica.
One evening we were headed out down to Laclede's Landing. I heard this sound of music coming out of this bar, and I was like, it caught my ear. And I was wondering who it was. And lo and behold, that was the bar we were going to. It was called the West Bank Club. And Otto's Revenge was playing in there. And the sound caught my ear. So I watched them finish up their set, and I went over to the band. They were up on stage packing their stuff up, and started talking to Jerry. He was a guitar player in the band, and asking him about the band, where they play and all this stuff, and asking when their next show was. So before I left, we exchanged phone numbers, and about a week later I went over to the house. I had a guitar. I used to fiddle around on and play a little bit. I brought it over and messed around with Jerry with the guitar, met the other members more formally of the band, and that's basically how I came to hooking up with Otto's Revenge and meeting them.
Well, the phone rang one day. It was this guy named Kurt, and he says, "Hi, I'm Kurt Hoffman, and I understand you played saxophone." And you know how Kurt talks. We really think the sax would sound great in our band, and we want you to come play. And I said, "Well, I don't know about this." And I went and checked it out, and well, I wasn't sure that what I was playing was really fit, but he liked it and said it was just what they wanted.
I would not listen to anything except punk all through the 80s. It was just punk or nothing. And then I somehow discovered jazz and Chet Baker and just a lot of those classic jazz musicians, and really got into that. We had split up back in the mid-90s and then came back together. And I had been working with Dan in another band in the interim, and so I brought him over, and that's when he got incorporated, and I just really loved that fusion of those different styles. I started drumming in the real early 80s. I think I started my first punk rock band in 81. It's called Complete Chaos. I grew up in Australia, and that's when I started playing. I wanted to play guitar, and we couldn't find anybody that could play punk rock drums because it was so new and nobody really knew how to do it. And I would get back behind there and just go like this really fast, and kids couldn't figure it out. They'd be too jazzy, and finally my guitar player was like, "Why don't you just play the drums?" I was like, "Oh man, I don't carry those things around," but all right, and so I just started playing the drums. I was a pretty young kid. I guess I would have been about 14 or 15 at the time. Well, Jerry worked with me at St. Louis Music, and something happened where he wanted to get back together with Otto's, and he said he wanted to do a few shows, and I was the first person he asked, so I would do it, and we'd played shows with them before, and I was like, "Oh, these guys are great, yeah, I'll play with them." And that was kind of it. I went to one rehearsal, and the guys were like, "Yeah, man, you're it for sure."
Oh gosh, how far back do you want to go? I met Jerry mid-90s or so at work. We worked together, and definitely liked him from the get-go. He is the sweetest guy you'll ever meet, which is kind of hilarious to me because when you hear the lines he's written, the guitar stuff, it's angry.
Punk rock was really hard to find in St. Louis. St. Louis wasn't really a great, hub for especially that, type of music. So I really grew up on like classic rock and hard rock and heavy metal, things like that. And then as I got older, I started meeting guys that knew punk rock, and through word of mouth, I learned about who these bands were.
The punk scene was underground, roughly hewn, just a raw material, a raw mineral, very underground. It was very diverse though. And all the bands, there was a solidarity among the bands. You could be in a punk band, but you could have friends that were in a funk band, and everybody could hang out and drink together and go to each other's shows.
Somehow most of the bands managed to have fun, make it fun, but it was still a reaction, a pissed off reaction to everything that had been before. And I will say Kurt's lyrics fit that perfectly.
From 89 on, I think in those 5 or 6 years, from 89 to 95, I think St. Louis really had a good, good music scene going, which strangely enough did fit what we were doing. It was like the heavier bands, and it seemed to like St. Louis to seem to be really coming up in that, with that type of music, and a lot of bands that were doing what we were doing really well. Like the Eyes were huge, and the Unconscious. Why it coincided with what we were doing was just dumb luck. That's how I look at it, because we were going to do what we were going to do anyways, and we didn't care if like 10 people liked us. We just wanted to do it our way, but we ended up getting really lucky. And so I think, the success we did get was just timing. Timing is everything. So it worked really well for us.
Their shows, they would get all kinds of people, as you would expect. Somehow they managed to get everybody looks completely different, but they're all really cool people. And I guess to some extent, a crowd's an extension of the band. And they had a good crowd. It was fun. Every show I went to was a blast.
If I could let people hear them, I know it would catch on. If you tell one person, they tell a friend, more people coming to the show. That was the biggest thing, was promoting the band. Like I said before, I believed in it. The goal was to get as many people as you could to hear the sound of what they were putting out. And that was really the goal, is introducing the music into the St. Louis scene. One of the biggest things I did was push for more and more places to play. I don't care if it was at a little coffee shop to the time that we played out in front of Blockbuster Music, to here we played in New York City. We played one of the biggest places in New York City, the Mercury Lounge, which sits not too far away from CBGB's. I mean, that's huge. But that was the goal, is to get Otto's Revenge into people's ears. Let them hear us, what we're about. We're about making music. That's what it was about.
When it was hard to get shows, we would do put our own shows on at our house. The whole band lived together. Within the first year, we were living at my dad's. I was living at my dad's house when I first started the band, but I moved out, got a house, and then pretty shortly thereafter, Jerry moved in, and then later, I think our first bass player moved in. That kind of started this thing early on of the band living together, and we actually all lived together throughout most of the history of the band. And so we did a lot of shows at the house. A lot of people remember those. You know, we were always rehearsing. We had a pretty regular schedule of that. We did start recording pretty early on, even doing our own recordings on 4-track and then going into the studio.
I couldn't even tell that you were off a little bit. They just all blended in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Back then, Jerry and I would be at Kinko's on Friday night, cutting and pasting together flyers, and spend the weekend driving all over St. Louis, putting flyers up on Del Mar, all the places at the colleges. We really did work hard to promote the band. We even had a monthly newsletter that we had a mailing list that we get from people at the shows, and we had this crazy newsletter that we try to put out every month. We had a lot of people who just hung out at the Otto's Revenge house, and so you tell people about the shows, and a lot of friends. I think any band, if everyone always has those big hopes and dreams, I think we were realistic, and we were trying our best to see how far it could go. But it was always frustrating. There was always something that seemed going wrong for us, down to we seemed to always be having bad luck, whether it was members quitting or just crazy things. Like, we had worked forever to get a show at Mississippi Nights, which was one of the biggest clubs at the time, and we finally got a show down there, opening for the Urge, and it ended up being like one of the worst snowstorms ever. And of course, we were determined. We were like, we're not going to miss this show, and we all plowed through the snow to get down there. But it was like us and the Urge and the bartenders, and that was it. So we were constantly having things like that happen.
It's funny. I think everybody thinks at first, like, all right, this sounds rad. We're gonna go tour or whatever, and it just never really works out. I'm sure it's an age-old story. Everybody will say the same thing, but it's sort of, you start working, and have a kid, you have a baby, and things start changing. So I don't think it was ever thinking like, let's go on the road and be rock stars. Not that the music wasn't good enough. It was just, we were starting to grow up kind of right there, and sort of figuring out what do you do with your life, and could we really make music our whole life? And I don't think it was probably a smart decision to do it at the time.
You're not making money at this. This isn't, you know, paying your rent. You're doing it for the love of it. You still have to work a full-time job to make ends meet. And that's where the tough part comes in. We all worked full-time. And, you know, we did what we had to do. I remember calling in sick just so I can go and do a show the night before, or things of that nature, or taking a day off without pay. But that's what we did because we wanted to, because we believed in what we were doing.
That was the whole thing, is we just loved doing it. And even when you had all this bad stuff happening, or you really weren't getting the rewards, we weren't nationally famous, I think that's when you really discover, well, why are you doing this then? And we were just drawn to it. We just loved doing it.
Well, it wasn't like the band ended exactly like, okay, you know, like a lot of bands end where people wind up not getting along with each other and say, we've had enough of each other, we're going to move on. It wasn't really like that.
Kurt literally walked up to like the third, I call it the third band house, because there was Richmond Heights, Maplewood, and then South City. And he walked up in my room and he said, I'm just leaving the band. I think he needed a change, and I think I needed a change. And we were getting older, and I think we both wanted families. I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on in our heads, and he just decided to just, I'm leaving. Because he goes, I know you. He goes, if I go and play with other people, you'll come with me and you'll do it, but you won't like it. You know, kind of thing, you know, and he was right. He knew me better than I knew myself. So he says, I'm just going to leave. And then I think that, you know, I got married, you know, like maybe a year later, and then he moved to California and got married a couple years later, and both started having families, obviously. And so yeah, you know, that particular year was pretty bad because I was really mad at him, and I think we were both just, you know, butting heads. But like I said, we got older, and you know, time heals, and then we started talking on the phone, and I think we talked enough to, you know, to say, look, you know, stuff happens, and, you know, we're still friends, and let's give it a go.
Over the summer, something popped in my head that I was like, oh wow, 89 is when I met Jerry, and it's 2014. It's been 25. Well, I wasn't thinking about Otto's Revenge. I just thought, oh, it's been 25 years since I've been playing music. And that's when I realized, wow, Otto's Revenge is 25 years old. And I thought we should do something to commemorate that. So that's when I thought, I'm going to put out our CD. Next thing I know, I started talking to the rest of the band, contacted everyone, and I didn't know what they would be saying or doing, but everyone was really excited about it. And it turned out something came up where I was going to be coming into St. Louis. And I said, would you guys want to get together and play? And everyone was totally into it.
Well, it came to me again. It was a phone call from Kurt, which was out of the blue. The phone rang and picked it up, and Kurt in his voice, which is unmistakable. Hi, this is Kurt Hoffman, and oh my God, how you doing, man?
Kurt just called me, and I just checking in. And he said, hey, have you ever, would you consider, reforming? I've got this idea.
I just got a call out of the blue from Kurt, and he just said, would I be interested in it? And I was like, wow, Otto's Revenge, man. Let me go dust off my old CD. And I was like, I remember I loved the guys, and they were great.
I said, well, what'd you have in mind? He says, well, why don't we just see what we can do and write some more material and just have fun with it. And I think if I remember right, I said okay right away because I loved it so much.
I've had other offers to reform other old bands, and I'm like, I don't have the time to be in a band, but I have time for this. I have time to get with those guys, rip out some songs, and do a show. Like, yeah, I could do that.
You know, it was kind of like the same feeling came back, and as I said, since there was never any hard feelings between us, it was very easy to get back with these guys. It wasn't like we had issues we had to overcome or anything like that. It was, we were all for it, and we got everybody back, but the bass player, who I think he was so, the bass player was so involved with other bands, he couldn't come back.
I was a fan of Otto's way before any of this. I was a fan. I went to their shows. I went to their reunion shows. I had quit playing for about 2 years. I got out of playing any kind of music. I was just kind of bored with it all. And I started thinking about kind of doing some more stuff again. And I went, you know what? I'm going to find myself a band. What the heck? So you get on Craigslist, you type in the word bass into the musician section, and you get all kinds of great stuff. And one of the first things that was there said, bass player needed, Otto's Revenge. There was an email address, I think, so I sent this generic email address, didn't know who it was, sent the generic email address a message. My message basically said, hey, is Jerry involved in this? Because if he is, then I'm in, and I want to do it. And Kurt answered back right away, said, yes, of course Jerry's in it, and we'd love to have you. I had to come audition. I was supposed to have learned 4 songs, but since I was a fan, we went through 8 to 10 songs that night. Just boom, 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 and it clicked. And yeah, I was pretty tickled about the whole thing. Steve, I'd never really played with Steve Dockraden, the drummer, and he's an amazing drummer. He's incredible, just rock solid, and hits them hard and does some wonderful stuff on there. It's just great. I'd never really heard him play much. He's fantastic. So boy, it was great. It worked out fantastically.
Oh man!
All right, 2 songs, and that happened.
That's the way to do it. Right?
I mean, I had no idea what was going to happen when I called Jerry. And when we all decided to practice, I had no idea what was going to happen. We were just like, hey, I'm going to be in town. Let's get together and play. And yet, that's what was so cool about it. There was no expectations, but it just was like, wow, this is so fun and so easy. That first day, we wrote like 4 or 5 new songs. That's what's been so cool about it is, in the past there was all this pressure and all this trying so hard and yet it being so difficult. And this time we're not even thinking about it. We're just having fun. We were recording the songs. We've been recording the songs as we practice them, especially the new ones, so we can learn them. And as I've been listening to them, it's so cool. Like every song as it's playing, you hear at the end of it, everyone's just laughing. We're just having fun.
I mean, you look at over, 20 years later, wow, can we pull this off? Can it be done, It's like I said, it's really up to the guys playing the instruments. I think it's great. Why not? Write some more new songs, tune up some old ones. I think Kurt has a good vision with things with stuff like that. Like I said, he likes to expound upon new areas and horizons, and why not? You never say never. You never know what's going to happen. You don't know what the future has in store. So let's keep the avenue open for that.
I think it's great. It's like it's kind of like a zombie, It had died and then it came back to life, and now it's wandering the earth eating faces. It's fucking awesome.
Dorian guts on the bathroom wall. It's springtime in America. I'm head for the fall.
I'd say, the new style for the album, I think, would be, par for the course for Otto's Revenge. I think if people used to know us, they will definitely hear, like if you put it on a stereo in a room, people that knew us would be like, wow, that's Otto's Revenge. They would recognize it, and there is going to be a range of songs that'll sound like our old stuff, but I think the new stuff that we're writing is going to be like the new and improved, Otto's Revenge. So I think the fans that knew us before are going to love it, and I think with the with Jeff on board and of course Steve on drums, who's phenomenal, and of course Kurt, enough said. Kurt's fantastic as well. I mean, I think everybody's just putting their all into it, and I think with the songwriting and everything, I think the fans that we had before, I think they're really going to like the new songs. I'm really excited for everybody to hear the new stuff that we've done. I think it's a really we're turning the corner with it.
I think it's just the coolest thing in the world that I have been friends with Jerry for so long, and it's not that it had never even been a thought to be a part of Otto's Revenge. Man, oh man, it's amazing how well it's gelled, and like I said, I'll write it till it's done.
There's Otto. Otto.
I guess none of the landmarks went off in Steve's room.
Nope.
And I'd like to thank them for being here. And right now they're going to do a song called TV Nation.
TV Nation going to sing.
I just think it's been a really cool experience for me to do this, because music is not, it's always was this thing of okay, I'm approaching 50 now, why am I spending time being in a band again and making music and putting all this time into this? But it's when you really fall in love with something, there's been times I'm like, I shouldn't be wasting my time with this, but it's just been so much fun, and it's been so cool to connect with these guys again, that I'm just really grateful that it's happened, and it's just been a really cool experience. It's something you wanted and you worked hard at, and it didn't work out, but now something's just happened it's happening, and it feels awesome.